So I suppose something you really nicely explained, well, not nicely, but you explained well, was the really high-level issues between the UK and France. I was just wondering if there were any like local French groups, particularly around the Calais region, that were looking for links in the UK, and through that process of communication could show that actually there is a human element in France and the UK that wants this to work, despite some of the politicians that seem to be playing this blame game. So did you come across those groups?
Yeah, thank you for your question. I think I've actually forgot to talk about that, so thanks for bringing that up. I think there's a, so in the camp there are a bunch of charities basically working. Some of them are founded by British citizens who have gone there. The big one is called Care for Calais. Another one, which is a French counterpart and has been there longer than Care for Calais, is called L'Auberge de Migrants. They obviously are working on a voluntary basis, and people go there quite haphazardly without much organization whenever they have some time or the will to go and help out. There are a number of smaller charities too, and they are always looking to get people active there because there is a lot of help that's needed. I guess without having been a part of that organization formally, I mean, when you go as a volunteer for a short term, you are basically helping out and doing what somebody asks you who's been there longer. But that does create a good network, and you make good friends, you meet people who care about the issue. And then there is a huge, I think, especially the more people who go, you go home and they share their experiences and their friends end up going. So in my friend circle, several people have gone after somebody else has gone, which is useful. And they do seek contacts, of course, and I think they do appreciate, of course, they appreciate that people are coming from Britain to help out. There's a lot of great people working hard there, and are during now on Monday. Maybe I should stress that a bit more. On Monday, the camp will be demolished, and there is no clear plan for what will follow. The French authorities will basically put people on buses and send them out to temporary housing arrangements elsewhere in the country, spread apart, but there is no information given out to the refugees, so it's essentially quite a cruel tactic in which the single shred of stability that they maybe have built up over time in the camp will be taken away from them, the shelter in which they live will be taken away from them, their belongings may be lost. The very little shred of stability that you might have after living for months in these conditions will disappear, so it's quite a cruel tactic. As far as I'm aware, and when I was there, the aid organization Care for Calais that I volunteered with didn't know very much either. They're not given information on a rolling basis from the French authorities. So it's all speculative, and it creates confusion and a lot of despair that is unnecessary. So that means that this weekend, just because the camp is being demolished, actually more help than ever will probably be needed, so that once it disappears, we don't forget about from the refugees. They don't disappear from our minds.
I'm Liz Peretz, and I'm from the Campaign to Close Camps Field and active in various other things across the town, including Momentum. And I was really pleased to come to this because... Do you mind speaking up? She has trouble hearing. Very pleased to come to this because I like the idea of joining up the dots between housing, which seems to me such a basic human right, and to do it well seems to be something which kind of spells... what the future should be about, and what I know will be talked about for the rest of the weekend here. And what I'm struck by in this session is how we've somehow managed to be in a society which allows it to be normal to live in the way that we've just been told people are living in Calais, where your shred of a kind of shelter that you never know what's going to happen to you hour for hour, that kind of thing, really unsafe feeling. And the even more unsafe, if you talk to the detainees who've been there, people who are in Campsfield and other immigration removal centres throughout the world, in fact. We've come to accept that. Our society has come to accept that as normal, that those things happen, that people can be living in tents on the pavement, that people can be just locked up because some power somewhere, some government decides it's going to. Do you know, in France, the French government have a law that allows them to just put a kind of, it's a bit like kettling people, putting a row of policemen round a field, and that field becomes then a place that nobody else can go into, nobody that's in there can come out of. It's entirely under just under whatever the whim of the government is, and is often privatized. The government allows a private company to look after those spaces for them. Now, I'm saying that's become normal, and I'm saying here is a group of people that are trying to look at housing in the best possible way, in the most wonderful community-based way that they can do. And it's a question to all of you, really, as much as to the people on the panel. How can we reclaim what is normal, which isn't those things, which says those things are abhorrent, that nobody, no human being, words matter, Barbara started by saying, no human being should be in those positions, and we should somehow move to a situation where our children and our grandchildren think that those things, how could that society, that international group of people ever have allowed those things to be normal? Question.
Anyone wants to respond to that or say a few words about it? Even from the audience? Yes, please.
Yeah, I think when we come to look back at this time, we'll see what when it comes to looking back on today, this year, it'll be said what a colossal political failing the situation in Calais was. Absolutely massive. That's our frontier there. It's our frontier in the Mediterranean. It's our frontier in the Greek islands. And yet, we managed to ignore that fact. It is, hundreds of children in 20 miles away without relatives. It is truly shocking, truly shocking. And I think, there are convoys from Oxford. Couples have gone to Calais in the convoys. There's another convoy going from Oxford, I think, in November. The camp is about to be demolished, we're told. Thousands of police are going to be moved in. The French government are doing the British government's dirty work, and we're not doing anything about it in general. And I think the failure has been political. We haven't got at our politicians. We haven't told the councillors to get going on this in Oxford, because people in Oxford are concerned about it. This is what I'm arguing, is that we should be trying to get a movement of... We had a demonstration in 2015, in September, when several thousand people had a demonstration in the middle of Oxford saying refugees welcome here. But where has it gone? Where has it gone in terms of really putting pressure on politicians, local or national? Having a few Syrian refugees in Oxford is not enough, not enough. That's what the government said it would do, and it's not even doing that. So on Calais, a couple of other things. My position is let them in. Let them in. Always has been let them in. Let them in. Let them in to claim asylum, claim whatever immigration status they want to claim, and be processed. And you don't have to be in a detention centre to be processed, to go through the bureaucracy. That's what should happen. They should be given free tickets or be allowed to buy tickets on the ferries and come here and make their claim, Freedom of movement, that's my opinion. Okay. I just wanted to point out that in the Mediterranean, there's the same things that have been happening in Calais have been happening in all over the the Italian islands, the south of Italy, Sicily, the Greek islands, the border of in Athens, in Thessaloniki, fantastic solidarity actions. One of the actions is something called Watch the Med, which is a phone line. And it's a phone line that people setting out in boats from Turkey and North Africa have. And if their ship stops because it runs out of petrol, or is going to sink, or they're lost, they can ring this phone line, which is run by volunteers, who then get in touch with the authorities, the governments, the lifeboat people, the coast guards, who are given a coordinate from the telephone of the migrant and refugee on that boat, and can go and prevent thousands of deaths. That is a fantastic, and somebody who used to live in Oxford, Maurice Stirl, is one of the people organising that. If you Google Watch the Med, you'll see they do weekly reports. The other thing I wanted to do was to plug something. We have a demonstration at Campsfield every month. So if you work it out, it's about 270 demonstrations we've had there. We've had the same number of public meetings in Oxford. And it's a kind of rhythm of working, which means that we get things done. The demonstrations are very important. And the next one is on the 29th of October at noon. And there's a bigger one in November, on the 26th of November, which is the 23rd anniversary demonstration, which will be bigger. Normally there are 15 people. This one, we hope, will be 100. It'd be great if it was several hundred, but it's likely to be 100. It'd be a bit more if you go. It's quite interesting. If you haven't been there, you really ought to go and have a look at Campsfield. You can get the bus outside the cinema in Magdalen Street West, or you can get a lift, go on the Close Campsfield website, write an email saying, I want a lift. There'll be speakers, former detainees, people from Right to Remain, people from Movement for Justice, which hadn't been mentioned. A significant feature in campaigning against immigration detention in the last 2 years have been the very big demonstrations organised by Movement for Justice. They've got a website, which are the major component of, in terms of personnel, is migrants and refugees. So these demonstrations are motivated by migrants and refugees. They've had demonstrations of several thousand on a number of occasions outside Yarl's Wood. They've supported our campaigning work here against the Campsfield expansion. The next demonstration at Yarl's Wood in Bedfordshire, there'll be coaches from Oxford. If you go to the Movement for Justice website, you can find details about a coach or coaches from Oxford. That's on the 5th of November. I think I've got that right. It's a Saturday.
Barbara?
Well, I just wanted to say two short things. One is all the hoo-ha that's going on about the ages of the children at Calais. Those children who are now adults by the Home Office's definition, 18, have been traveling for several years. And the children that are going to be moved when the thing closes, who are 16 or 17 now, are going to be 17 or 18 very shortly. But they were all children, and they all had relatives here. The second thing is, Catherine Costello, the lawyer at the Refugee Studies Center, said to MSF, how can we call ourselves humanitarians if we just pull people out of the sea? Why aren't we bringing them across the sea? How can we call ourselves humanitarians if we put psychologists in illegal jails where refugees are being held? Why aren't we helping them escape jails? If we're not doing something that puts our own lives at risk, can we really call ourselves humanitarians?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just, thank you for that. I think, partly to me, I think it's a question of asking as well if it makes sense for us to think about the normality and what that normality is. Like, I think part of the problem as well is to thinking that this is an exception, that this is an emergency, when it's clearly not. And I think once we connect it to what people were talking about in the morning, right? Like, we're talking about solidarity across border in a moment where borders are made more real and more concrete for human beings and less real and less concrete for capital. Like, we're talking about the normality when something as human as home is first transformed from shelter into investment, and then from investment into a container of debt, not even investment anymore. So I think, to me, I think we need to do connecting the dot, not just as organization, but also understanding that the same logics has been played out in housing, in migration. And I wonder how much it's useful to actually pretend that there is a normality, that it's something else. And rather than say, okay, this is the new normal, unfortunately, we live on, and how do we organize precisely? How do you act legally when the legal is inhuman? I think becomes the question, really. So yeah, just a thought.
There's a part of me that wants to just leave the room because it's uncomfortable hearing all these stories and it's upsetting. But it's also really great to have all of this discussion about borders and migration in the context of thinking about housing. And I think there were two really specific housing links that came out. I can't remember who was speaking about it, but there's a housing of providing shelter for migrants and refugees and asylum seekers who are here and don't have anywhere to live. And there's also the way that the rhetoric around housing and immigration is happening in the media and politically in this country. And after the Brexit vote, I joined some friends who were going and door knocking and asking people questions about their perspective on immigration. And a lot of what came out there was concerns about housing and concerns about healthcare and the NHS. And that kind of the impact of austerity, which is leading people to scapegoat migrants. So I don't know how maybe we can bring that out a little bit more, or maybe those of us who are working on housing can really embed that a bit more into the work that we're doing.
Yeah, I think the thing that really stands out for me is that the topic of this discussion, that the borders we're talking about are not geographical ones. They're the borders that link across between this morning's sessions and today. Is the border between the people who own property and those who don't. The border between people who are eligible for support, whether that's housing benefit, which migrants aren't, and then refugees aren't even entitled to rent anywhere, even if they've got their own funds, because they don't have right to remain. They don't have that magic title which allows even somebody who wants to give them somewhere to live the legal right. They are legally prohibited from taking money from them to rent somewhere, because they're not allowed to have a space here. So we need to think about our psychological borders. I don't know if there's anything that people think we could do about that. And I also think that there's something we all need to understand, which our speakers today can enlighten people who don't know, why are there people who are coming as far as trying to get into this country specifically, as opposed to other parts of Europe? What are they trying to seek here that they can't get elsewhere? So I think if we have a better understanding of that, we might have a bit more, perhaps, pride in our country, that in legal terms they're seeking from us, that we should collectively have pride, that our legal structures can offer them that other people are not willing to offer.
Barbara, do you want to take this?
Well, I didn't hear your whole question, but the reason people want to come to the UK is because the UK has the reputation internationally of having a good legal system and human rights standards. And of course, lots of people speak English as their first language. Lots of people have connections here. And there's lots of the old colonial connections that people understand from before, and they've never lost them. So, and they hear BBC in lots of languages. So it's a natural place for asylum seekers to try to get here.
Thank you. I thought I could also add to that just maybe some stories from what I heard in the camp, because obviously when you arrive and you don't know much about the situation, you ask, well, what's preventing a lot of people from applying for asylum in France? And this is something that in the media is always given a lot of space. And I mean, yeah, why do people not apply for asylum elsewhere? But what I found in the camp from the refugees I spoke with was that many of them had links that Barbara just spoke about, perhaps language, perhaps a sense of, I know what that country is, that means something to me, perhaps I've heard about it, perhaps I have distant relatives or friends there, so it's some form of target. But otherwise, many have actually applied for asylum elsewhere or arrived in the UK elsewhere. So many have come, I'm from Sweden, and obviously Sweden has had previously a quite permissive asylum policy, which has been reversed in last autumn. So many of the refugees I met had been in Sweden or Denmark for several years while their asylum applications were going, and for various reasons they weren't granted asylum. Some groups, the UK has the UK, for example, recognizes some groups as being persecuted in their home countries, and so there is a kind of fast track for them to. So that is something positive that other countries don't have and reject applications of quite arbitrary results. But so there, and as also was mentioned by Barbara, many of these people have, of course, been traveling for years in Europe, and it's in the camp when there is no formal information being spread. You listen to what your friends are saying, you listen to what people around you are saying. Oh, he's going to try to climb on a truck tonight, should I do that as well? So, and these are often the parameters of information in which people are able to make decisions that are, I mean, basically quite uninformed and very dangerous.
So we got one last question, if anybody has one, and now we'll wrap this up. Any last question or comments or thoughts? All right, I guess that's it. Thank you very much, and please feel free to come up and talk to them and get contacts if you want to get involved in any way, and thank you for this.